Well, we have fun in scouting. We do a lot of fun things. One of the neat things we do is patch collecting. Now, patch collecting can be crazy, okay? It can be, yeah, I'll put a video. It's going to be up there. Go to it later. You know the drill. I'll tell you what, patch collecting is a lot of fun. There are two different camps when you're dealing with patches. Now, patches can be they can vary in different things, but typically things you would put on a uniform, an award, a merit badge, those kinds of things, they're different than the things you would get for your camp blanket or a vest. Okay, so there's a big difference between those two things. If you get something that really is cool, but it has no place on the uniform, then it shouldn't go on the uniform. Now, with that in mind, there is a place for temporary patches. If you get a temporary patch, say for instance you got something like this, you can hang this or even sew it to your pocket on this side of the uniform. In fact, check out the video up there if you're confused about where patches go. Okay, that is your temporary spot, and it's on every uniform. Okay, it's this pocket. That's one of the things to keep in mind. Another big place of choice for a lot of awards. Say for instance you have a Nova award, or you have these awards that are presented to you. If there's no place on the uniform, a really unique place is the back of the sash. Now a lot of scouts go, well, you know, it's like I'm hiding it or something. No. In fact, when you go up in front of the audience, that's the part they see, is all these really cool exotic awards you have on the back of your sash. I don't think that is actually explained when they gave you the sash. The sash on the back, that could be for merit badges, and if you try to get them all, you're going to need a bigger sash. So, you know, there's a lot of merit badges. But keeping that in mind, you can put all those awards. You know, like you get the Paul Bunyan Award, which is a cool axe. You could get totemship and firemanship and all that stuff. You could put that on the sash, and a lot of scouts do. Now, I want to also talk a little bit about patches on the sash, the OA sash. This is my OA sash, and you will notice that on this sash, it quite literally is blank on the back. Okay, there's no patches meant to be put on this. Now the only exception is the anniversary patch. That's the only patch they let you put on the front. Okay, that's it. There's no back patch. There's nothing you can do about that. Okay, they're not absolutely strict about it, but they want you to keep that honored. Okay, as a white strip. There's when you're in the OA, you know what I mean. But that's typically what they do with the sash. Now, there's nothing saying you can't put patches on the inside. Now, that's what I've done. I put it so that when I'm wearing the sash, I literally, here we go. I'm wearing the sash like this, okay? And then if I need to look up something, I can just flip it over and look up my original lodge, Makajuan up in Wisconsin, and then my two Tipasaw ones here, and I wrote little notes and dates and stuff on it. That's something you could do on the inside, but when you flip it back, the normal side, you don't know it's even there. So that's something you could do, and I even put the legend on the back so that it's closer to my heart, okay? It makes it more meaningful. But on the outside, you wouldn't know. You would not even know. So, but that's something to keep in mind. You can put patches in hidden places. Now, there are scout leaders out there that have these red jackets. I don't recommend sewing a bunch of patches to a felt jacket. Okay, felt is it's very warm, but it's expensive. Okay, so the cheaper vinyl ones that are out there, they don't hold up. If you're near a fire, like at night, you got a fire going, one of those little sparks can come over and put a hole in it. So one of the things that a lot of scout leaders do is they will put on other patches. You know, camporees, different events they've been at, even non-scouting patches. Now, another great place for patches is the military patches. If you've been in the military, if you're retired military or have family that are retired military, they will have a patch or different commemorative things that would be beautiful on different scouting things. Now, this you have to keep in mind. You yourself have to have earned them. If you're going to wear them, you have to earn them. For instance, if it's a Purple Heart patch, you didn't receive it, you shouldn't be wearing it, okay? You got to keep those things consistent. Now, if you put that patch within a woven picture of the person who received it as an honorarium, that's a different story, and that would be beautiful to be put on a blanket. These are things you can do. A lot of times the campfire blankets are very popular, and they will do things like I've seen blankets that they will literally cut a slot in it and then put edging on that edge of where they cut the material, and they will put a ton of patches all over it, and it's very warm because patches are very insulated. They usually have a plastic liner on the inside. That is a wonderful thing. They'll actually, like a poncho, they'll have a poncho, a blanket that they can have for a campfire. So if you have military patches that are honoring somebody, make sure it's real clear, okay? Don't just put a Purple Heart thing on there and have to explain, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with military people talking about that, okay? So unless you've earned it, that's different, okay? And it's something that we should recognize and be proud of. Another patch that's very popular, and especially in the scouting world, patches of Baden-Powell. This is one that's going out for winning. So those are very popular. They don't have any words on them, and they're antique. Actually, that one's a vintage patch from the 50s. Okay, so it's been around. And what's interesting is you can put those on your jacket, on your blanket. These are things you can do, and it really starts a conversation. You know, when you see that on somebody's blanket, they go, "Ooh, that's really cool." There are different patches you can put on different blankets. You can't wear them on the uniform, like we talked about earlier, but you can put them on the blanket. If you had something like this beautiful Queen's Jubilee patch, okay, that's gorgeous. Okay, that's something you could put on there. A very good friend of mine sent this to me, and there's different kinds. There's like this 4th of July one. It's a trademark kind of patch. It really isn't scout related, and even this one, it's all. This one's a biscuit challenge. For those in the United States, a biscuit is a cookie. Okay, what we call a cookie, the British people, they refer to them as biscuits. Now, what we call biscuits, they ain't a cookie. Believe me, you did something wrong if it's like a cookie. Anyways, these are patches you can put on a blanket if it's international patches. Try to avoid patches that are awards, like a British awards or something like that, but something that's commemorative or a camp out or Brownsea Island or something like that, that's totally fine. But if it's an award or some kind of official thing, you want to kind of respect that, okay? It is something to consider. Sometimes the British scouts like to collect different things, and they don't collect individual patches. They will actually go after collecting entire shirts. So that's possible. We know that from a lot of the reports coming back to the U.S. contingent at World Jamborees. They want full shirts. They don't want a patch. They want the whole thing. So that's something you got to think about if you're into patches, and where they go, what is appropriate, what is not. Another big thing to consider, now this is just, we want to make sure that we live up to being trustworthy. you want to make sure that if you're using a logoed or a trademark patch, say it's your favorite baseball team or it's your favorite football team or what have you, you want to have that on your camp blanket, but make sure that it's licensed, okay? You don't want to bring your trustworthiness into question over a patch, okay? Make sure that it is licensed, okay? That they're paying the royalties to use that image. Very important, okay? You want to make sure that your patches are legitimate, to make sure that they're not counterfeit, okay? There are counterfeit patches out there, and there are people who collect them. That's a whole nother show. So there's a lot of different kinds of patches out there. Have fun with it. I've seen patches where they do the different shapes and designs and then do different borders, and it is absolutely amazing. So collecting patches and using them to create a wonderful campfire blanket that will cause conversations and laughter and fun. That's the beauty of the patches. So keep up that work. Integrate those things in. Try to avoid using any trademark or military stuff on the uniform. Now, I often get this question about my patrol patch. This patrol patch on the side that I have here is not a military patch. It was too bright to be a military patch. It needs to be darker. So, it's too bright. But the person who got it authorized by our council was with the military, and they were left with these because they were too bright. They couldn't use them on the military uniform. So, that being the case, they said, here are these patches, throw them away, do what you want with them. We said, well, we'll use them as our patrol patch. And they were authorized because they were never military. They were never for military use. That's important. That is important. The Griffins have since disbanded, and hopefully next season I'll have a new shirt. So look forward to that. But that being the case, keep your patches as clean as possible and in the proper place. Check out the videos later on, and I'll tell you what, scouting is a lot of fun. We do fun things, and patches can do a lot of fun things. So keep that in mind. About the history of the council shoulder patch. Now, originally, the uniform, and keep this in mind, I'm going to put a video up here, okay? It's going to have a little thing that'll come up there, okay? Don't go there now. It'll be there at the end, okay? So go ahead and watch the rest of this, but that is about the history of the Scout uniform. When the Scout uniform first started, it was really tailor-made for the Scout. It was a jacket. And back prior to the 30s, it was done at a tailor. And the only thing you could buy were the buttons. That's really the BSA buttons. That's really what survives today. A lot of those jackets are based on a military design known as the doughboy kind of jacket. It's khaki green. It's kind of out of the World War I, the Great War. So that's where that kind of comes from. When they were designing it, they had no real spot to put councils. It was far more important to work with the youth inside of a troop, inside of a district handled by commissioners. That was kind of their thing. The council came later, okay? Council, districts, regions, all that stuff was in development. But during that time, they used different tags on their uniform. Now, the CSP that everybody's familiar with today really didn't officially occur until, officially, from the supply division of the Boy Scouts until 1970. That's when it became standardized, and we'll talk about that. But that's the amazing thing. Prior to this, it kind of developed over time. For the first 20 years of scouting, from 1910 until 1930, there was many different ribbons that were used. Now the British, they would often use a ribbon on the left shoulder to identify what area, what type of region they were from, and this was often used at events, world jamborees, national jamborees. That was something that would go on the uniform. In 1937, the first jamboree, and I'll put another link up there, go there later. Definitely check that out. The jamboree, the very first jamboree, they had already had a very standardized thing. So they didn't have ribbons, but they still used tags on their uniform so that if they were lost, they could see if somebody was out of place, if they were in the wrong area, just by looking at these tags. Now, during that same time, they would also use ribbons on the right shoulder for the patrols, and different patrols had different colors. National actually came out. I'll put a description in the links down below or off to the side, wherever they're putting it now, okay? It used to be the doobly-doo, as they called it. I don't know where it is now. In some browsers, it's on the side. Sometimes it's underneath. It's crazy. Anyways, in that description, there is a catalog from 1925. It's a PDF. Feel free to download it. It actually has a list of all of the different patrols and the different colors. For instance, the Owl Patrol is in all blue. There's 4 ribbons. It's 2 ribbons folded in half and then all 4 pieces sticking out. The all blue was the Owls. Also, if you're the bear, the outside would be brown with red on the inside. So it was actually 2 brown and 2 red on the patrol ribbons. Now by 1930, they had started to move into what is known as the red strip. The red strips typically would have white embroidery on them. Here is an example. Now these strips, they would just have the area they were from or the council name and maybe a state. So that was something, and the different strips, and you could use these different strips to kind of identify. Now this is where it ended up, again on the left shoulder. Now up until 1955, the council had the option of coming up with a very unique patch, and it was usually in the strip, or what is known as the shield shape with a rounded top. Here's an example. Now that is pretty much the standard up until about 1955. There are some council examples where they actually have a round patch, or they have different types of patches. So that wasn't standardized at all. Now often Cub Scouts would wear a dark blue twill background with gold stitching or yellow stitching on there. That stood out really nice on the uniform. In fact, if it was sewn on really well, it looked like it was part of the fabric of the uniform. Now Sea Scouts and a lot of the different explorer groups and stuff would have different colors. Sea Scouts, of course, would have white ones and black lettering, or they would have dark navy blue with white lettering. So that's possible. So there's a lot of different variations out there. So keep looking for them. And it depends on the region and the placement and where it was. They didn't make large quantities of these. So people who collect those strips, there could be 20 different variations of that one strip over a 30-year period. Now from 1955 to 1970, the patch kind of went through an evolution, and a lot of councils came up with their own designs. And it really was up to the council to come up with a patch that would be approved locally for the wear of the youth. Now the council shoulder patch that we all know today actually came about in 1970. BSA's supply division got standard with all of the different varieties that they were seeing throughout the United States. They were seeing all different shapes and sizes and all kinds of craziness. So they standardized it down to 3 new basic shapes and also used the older 1955 red council strip. They used that too, so there was 4 different variations. Now, as you can see up here, these range from the diamond shape, which was the first variety that they recommended, the keystone shape, and of course we have the rounded keystone. Those were the first 3 new ones. The 4th one that they kind of grandfathered in was the red and white patch. It was a twill patch, usually on a cut edge. It didn't have a folded or creased in edge to it. And that became, they wanted it in there for a time. So over time, that was slowly phased out. Today, the most common one that's out there is the number 2, and that is the keystone. The keystone strip is by far the most common out there. There is a lot of council strips that were worn at national jamborees. And as a bonus, I want to tell you a little bit about that. Just like regular council strips, they were not really authorized. Okay, these were, it's not that they were bad, they just didn't have a process. They would come out with the patch and their scouts would wear it to that event. And the Jamboree is no exception. From 1937 all the way up until 1970, they had really the range. Okay, so you could find different council strips. The council strips, which is also known as the council shoulder strips. That's the neat thing about it. It varies. The CSP became JSP, okay, for Jamboree. And they really didn't have an official one until 1980, where the supply division finally said, okay, enough with all these different variations, and we are going to ask all the councils to please stop making all these different variations and stuff, and then take that and make it authorized. So until 1980, there was all kinds of JSPs. From 1980 on, for the 1981 Jamboree, these were approved by Nationals, so they could use Nationals logo and Nationals copyright and all that stuff, so that it didn't infringe anything or make anybody mad. So they had to get approval. Now, whether or not they do that today, I don't know. And that's something that it's very difficult to find out. But as a bonus fact, that's where JSPs actually came from. Let's talk about designing patches. Patches typically do very well if you're doing a series. So if you've been called upon because you're a great artist, you can do drawings rather easily, and you have some great ideas that you want to express through embroidered patch. Now, in Britain, they often say they're not patches, they're badges. Okay, we think of badges differently than they do, and so I'm going to use the word patches because that's what we use in the United States. So with patches, if you do them in a series, I did a video recently this season. I'm going to put the link up there. That particular video talks about all the different designs for Order of the Arrow, and they have an annual theme, and a lot of the patches that are done in a theme. Now, there are some requirements that are unique to the patch that you are designing. And there are some that are, like for instance with Order of the Arrow, you have to have certain things within the patch. And we'll talk about how to incorporate that. But the different things to look for, like a council name, the event name, the date, that might be stuff that they want in the patch. And you have to include that with your design. Now down below, there's a little thing that says more. You click on that and there's a ton of links in there. in there are the guidelines from the BSA on a lot of the color and how to handle the logo and how that kind of stuff needs to be considered when you're designing your patch. The last thing you want to do is put in your patch and have it come back and have all these different things that you got to put in there somehow. Think about them ahead of time will help design your patch better. Now, as we go through this, I'm going to use a lot of terms that you may not be familiar with if you've never really been in the patch trading stuff. And this is great information about designing patches that a lot of people that trade patches want to know about. So these kind of go together. So I'm going to put a link up there. That one is about patch trading, and they will talk about a little of the terminology and stuff. Now, as you design your patch, you also need to be thinking about where this patch is going to go. Is it going to go in a temporary space on the pocket? Is it something that's meant for a camp blanket? Is it meant for a jacket? You need to think about where this is heading. That's very important for your design. Now, again, I'm going to use terminology that you may not be familiar with. So, as far as placement on a uniform, check out that video. That'll tell you where everything goes on the regular uniform. There are many types and features within patches that need to be understood in your design. I'm going to put them up there and you'll see what all these different things mean. As you can see up here, this is known as a merrowed edge. The merrowed edge is designed to finalize the edge of the patch, and it helps keep its shape when it's washed and when it's sewn on. It also leaves little loops on the back where you can actually sew these on very easily to your shirt. Now, the opposite is used in this. This is called hot needle. Hot needle is a way of melting the threads on the edge, leaving a very sharp edge. It's not really used a lot as far as patches that would be put on a shirt or a jacket or something of that nature. It can, but often it's very sharp, and because of that it's very hard to get a sewing needle to actually attach this. So because of that, these are often used in temporary patches. Now, this is a neat feature. Some patches are not fully embroidered. We'll talk about that. But if they're not, they have this backing that's sort of a canvas, and they call that twill. The twill backing that's on the side that you see, not the back of the patch, but the actual side you see, will have this on it. And depending on what direction it's going, this is important for patch collectors. A lot of the old patches didn't have full embroidery, so they typically would look at that twill to see what direction it was going. If it was going straight up and down, side to side, left to right, you name it. So the twill direction was very important. Now, with full embroidery, the whole patch from edge to edge is covered with stitching. Now, it might be a flat stitch or a crow stitch or something of that nature that just leaves a background, like a sky or something. That's totally fine. But the entire backing has stitching on it. That's the wonderful thing. None of the twill is coming through, like we mentioned before. And because of that, a lot of the embroidery companies will give you anywhere from 8 to 12 different thread colors to use on a fully embroidered patch. Now, if your design goes beyond that standard amount, you might get a small charge for additional threads, but it can be used in a very dramatic way. I have seen patches that had cardinals on it. Bright red. You would think that's the only thread. No, there's reds and browns and off colors and grays and you name it. It makes the patch really come out. And as a designer, that's what you want to do. Now we get into some of the really unique things. There is a way that you can actually hide things within the patch. A lot of times it's called ghosting. So if you are required to put BSA on the patch and there's no way to incorporate it because all of it is a bird or a fish or something in your design, you could ghost it over an area that uses the same thread. It would just go a different direction. So as you turn the patch, you would actually see this feature. Now, ghosting can go beyond that. You can make the entire patch one color, and you can use different kinds of threads. Currently, I believe that most embroidery companies have available ultraviolet thread. They also have glow-in-the-dark thread that can be incorporated. And these are things you can add on to really make a dramatic statement with your design. Now, most embroidery companies will include a loop. This is a very small charge that they add on this loop. This loop is meant for the temporary button that's actually on the Scout shirt. This particular one is actually, you can hang this very easily, even at the event that this is for. You can actually have people wearing them. So that's what this loop is for. Now, before they had the loop, they often would just have a buttonhole or an actual slot that you could move the button through. And this was a lot of times on this particular type. This is older. It's not meant for the buttons under the pocket flap. It's meant for the buttons that went through the pocket that actually hanged on the outside. This went over that button. So it was a different way of doing it. It'd be nice to see those come back. Okay? I don't know if the embroidery companies may have a problem with that, but this is something that you might incorporate within your design. Now, finally, we need to think about the back of the patch. In the past, a lot of patch collectors paid a lot of attention to this because there was reproductions of patches, famous patches, that were coming out. Now, a lot of patches were put on felt, and this felt often had a cloth backing. This allowed the stitching to go through and to hold up better on the uniform. Later on, this cloth was basically a gauze-looking material. It's very wide open areas. It often had a glue or some kind of paste on it, and that was what they would sew the patch onto. Now, some embroidery companies replace this with a film or a plastic or a paste. They actually used paste in some of these, like you see in the example. That is very common on the back of very old patches. Now, today, we use a standard plastic material that's on the back of the patch. This helps hold the shape of the stitching that's in the patch. This was often a combination. Now, sometimes they didn't even have a canvas material that they were sewing into. They literally were sewing directly into a material that would be left on the back, like a plastic material. Even today, we have that same plastic, but a lot of times you will see the supply division has actually got its logo all over the back. It's just repeated on the back. And sometimes, depending on the people who make the patch, they will even identify the patch or put a hologram sticker on the back of the patch. Now, depending on the people that are making the patch, will depend on all of those different features, but it's something to keep in mind while you're designing the patch. Now, when it comes down to it, the patch, once it's designed, it's just the patch itself, the design, the drawing of it on a piece of paper, can be cardstock even, that needs to be put together with little lines that come out from it explaining each of the different features of the patch. This will help the embroidery company reconstruct that design. So when they reconstruct that, they will be sending back a proof. It's usually electronic, but that proof will actually have your design put on it. And that proof is what you refer to make sure that they've got the design the way you want it. Now there's two other things that come into the designing of a patch that a lot of people don't think about. When you look at a patch, it's going to be loomed. It literally is going to be done repeatedly on a machine, okay? They charge for the rectangle or square. So if you have a round patch that's 3 inches, they're going to charge you for 3 by 3, okay? They're going to square it off. Even the space that you're not using, you'll end up paying for. So if you have just a crescent, all of the stuff that's not used, that you're going to have to pay for that. That's why those little knots and badges are so expensive. That it takes up a lot of materials to do that type of embroidery. So keep that in mind when you're making your design. At one time, when I was an advisor, I was stunned by a patch that we put together that had a shark bite taken out of it. Literally, patch was missing, okay? It was a combination, but we had to pay for the whole patch, even the stuff that wasn't there in the final patch. So that is something to keep in mind. It's a neat feature, it's different, but you end up paying for it. It ends up being part of your cost. Now, a lot of times the minimum run on most patches is 200. The maximum depends on your embroidery company. Now, I hope that this has been kind of an enlightening video about patch design, patch construction, and all the different features that are on patches. So that's something that a lot of patch collectors may or may not know. And this kind of completes that knowledge of designing a patch. There's all kinds of patches out there. And I know that you have something that you want to put together for your troop or your district. That's something that a lot of leaders are called upon to do. And the youth should be taking that. And this video is meant just to give you an overview of all the different facets and things that need to be considered when doing a design. It's critical that those things are met. You want to make sure your colors are right. You want to make sure your logos are right. You make sure that all of your branding is correct. Make sure that it's authorized by the district or the council or even the national. So there are occasions. It is very important that your design be completely unique. Okay? We do not need, the world does not need more of somebody else's patch. Okay? Let's be trustworthy and do your own artwork, do your own ideas. Okay? A lot of times scouts can get into a lot of trouble by using copywritten materials. Okay? So you need to have those things taken care of. If it's part of your theme, if it's part of what you do, if that's part of what you're going to put on the patch, you need to get written permission from the lawyers of who owns it, okay? So you can get in some serious trouble. So definitely go for something that's unique, something that's different. That's the key to making a great patch. And you do great work. Oh my gosh, you're probably mentoring scouts and helping them achieve great things. It is an awesome thing that a youth can say, I designed that patch. I did that. That's something that will last. So that's a very lasting thing. And as we mentor, as we coach, as we help our youth succeed, I want you to know that I'm very proud of you. And I want you to keep up the hard work. Our scouts need you. They need your help. And I am so glad that you're sticking with it and in there and doing that hard work. Thank you so much. And I will see you on the trail.